In a world that glorifies noise, constant communication, and visible expressions, love often hides in the quietest corners. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. It begins softly, in silence where words cannot yet reach. When a man starts to fall in love, it rarely happens through the things he says aloud. It begins in the pauses between his sentences, in the quiet awareness that something inside him feels calm when you are near. It is not the words he speaks that tell you his truth, it is the silence he keeps that holds it. In silence, the heart listens differently. It listens not through the ears, but through presence. There is a moment often unnoticed when his attention starts to linger, not because of desire, but because of peace. He does not chase you with language. He stays with you through energy. It's the stillness he feels around you that begins to reshape his inner world. Words belong to the mind, but silence belongs to the soul. And love that begins in the soul does not rush to explain itself. It simply grows in its own rhythm. When he sits beside you and says nothing, that silence is not emptiness. It is full of feeling. It carries all the things he is not yet ready to speak. The gratitude, the admiration, the quiet awe of finding someone who doesn't drain him. In a world that constantly asks men to prove, to perform, to pursue, silence becomes a refuge. To sit next to someone and not feel the need to speak, that is how he knows something sacred is unfolding. Love that begins in silence teaches him that peace can be stronger than excitement. Many believe love must be declared loudly to be real. But the truth is, what is real does not need to be declared at all. When a man truly feels something, he often grows quieter. His words become fewer, his actions more grounded. You will notice it not through confessions, but through consistency. He remembers the smallest details, not because he is trying to impress, but because something in him naturally pays attention. The silence between you becomes a field where connection breathes. There is a wisdom hidden in the silence of love. It reveals how energy moves deeper than expression. When he starts to fall for you, his mind does not always understand why. His body relaxes around you. His breathing slows. His guard begins to lower. He finds himself wanting to linger a little longer, not to do anything, but simply to be. That is love in its purest form. When the soul feels safe enough to stop running, when he no longer feels the need to fill the space with explanations, that is when his heart has already begun to speak. Love that begins in silence is not passive. It is active in an unseen way. It watches, it observes, it remembers. It pays attention to your tone, your moods, the way you look at the world. He begins to adjust without realizing it, speaking softer, listening deeper, becoming gentler. It is the quiet transformation that does not demand acknowledgement. Silence becomes the container through which understanding is built. He doesn't need to say he cares, because everything in his presence already says so. In silence, the truth of love matures. Noise creates confusion, but silence reveals essence. When two people can share space without the need to fill it, they begin to recognize each other's inner rhythm. It is not chemistry that binds them, it is harmony. The same way music depends on the pauses between notes, love depends on the stillness between words. Without silence, there is no depth. Without stillness, there is no knowing. A man's silence when he loves is not avoidance, it is reverence. It is his way of protecting the feeling before the world names it. Some emotions lose their power when spoken too soon. He waits because he wants to understand it first. In that waiting, the feeling deepens. In that quiet space, his affection becomes something more than attraction. It becomes devotion. What he cannot yet say, he begins to show in 1,000 subtle ways. His eyes soften. His tone changes. His patience grows. Love that begins in silence does not seek to impress. It seeks to connect. It does not chase intensity, it seeks alignment. Words can flatter, but silence can reveal. When he stops speaking to be right and starts listening to understand, he is already loving you in a way he doesn't yet realize. Silence allows him to meet not just your appearance, but your essence. It removes the performance, the roles, the expectations. What remains is truth, two energies recognizing each other without disguise. In that quiet connection, he learns something sacred about love, that it does not need to be declared to be real. The truest affection rarely arrives with loud promises. It moves through the invisible, through gestures, pauses, and presence. When you meet someone who brings peace to your chaos, your soul begins to whisper long before your mouth can speak. That is why love begins in silence, because silence is where the soul speaks first. He does not say, "I love you," in the beginning, not because he doesn't feel it, but because the feeling is too profound for words. Words are small containers, and what he feels does not fit inside them. So he remains quiet, observing, feeling, learning. His silence is not hesitation, it is devotion in disguise. He is listening to what his heart says when it is near you. He is letting the feeling find its form. And in that sacred stillness, love begins to breathe. There comes a time in every man's heart when he stops chasing excitement and starts longing for peace. The thrill that once attracted him begins to fade, and what he starts to seek instead is something quiet, something that allows him to breathe. When a man feels comfort around someone, it begins to take root in places even he doesn't notice. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is powerful. Comfort becomes his hidden attachment, the silent bond that ties him not to the image of someone, but to the feeling of home that person brings. When he meets a woman who brings him comfort, his inner world starts to change. Without realizing it, his guard lowers. The tension in his voice softens. The constant need to perform disappears. He no longer feels the weight of needing to impress, because her presence already gives him a sense of being enough. That feeling of being accepted without effort becomes something rare in his experience. It is not beauty that makes him stay, it is the peace she gives him, because in her company he finds rest, and rest is the one thing most men secretly crave but rarely admit. Comfort becomes his attachment because it touches the deepest part of him, the part that is tired of pretending. He spends much of his life being strong, being logical, being in control. But when he meets someone who allows him to simply be, he experiences something sacred. He doesn't have to carry the armor. He doesn't have to filter his emotions. He doesn't have to play a role. That kind of freedom begins to anchor his heart. Love built on passion may burn brightly for a moment, but love built on comfort endures because it speaks directly to the soul's need for peace. A man may not even recognize it at first. He will tell himself that he just enjoys her company, that he likes the way he feels around her. He may not use the word love, but his actions will quietly reveal it. He will start to seek her presence without realizing why. The simple conversations, the shared silences, the way he feels lighter after being with her. All of it becomes nourishment to his inner life. Comfort becomes the rhythm of connection. It is not loud like desire, it is gentle like belonging. When comfort appears, it heals. Many men carry silent wounds, disappointments, rejections, the burden of being misunderstood. They rarely speak of these things, but they live with them every day. So when he finds someone who makes him feel safe enough to drop the performance, he begins to attach not to her appearance, but to the safety she represents. He starts to return again and again, not because of need, but because of peace. The calm she offers becomes the medicine his spirit has been searching for. It is in comfort that his real emotions awaken. When he no longer feels judged or compared, he begins to open his inner world. The stories he never told, the fears he never confessed, the dreams he never spoke aloud, they start to rise naturally. He doesn't plan it, it just happens. Because comfort is the soil where vulnerability can grow, and vulnerability is the bridge to love. A man may appear distant, but when he begins to share his quiet truths with someone, that is the sign that comfort has already transformed into attachment. The world often teaches men to find excitement, to chase what stimulates the senses. But the truth is, what sustains the heart is not intensity, it is ease. When he feels he can rest beside someone without losing his strength, that is when his attachment deepens. He does not fall in love with constant thrill, but with familiarity. The sound of her voice that steadies him, the calm in her presence that quiets his thoughts, these are the small, invisible threads that bind his affection. Comfort also builds trust. In a world where everything changes too quickly, where words are often empty, consistency becomes a form of love. When she remains gentle in chaos, patient when he is distant, kind even when things are uncertain, he begins to associate her presence with stability. His attachment grows not because she demands it, but because she becomes the only place his heart can truly rest. What he feels is not dependency, it is resonance. She becomes the mirror of the peace he's been searching for within himself. He will never say it openly, but the way he acts will tell the truth. He starts to make time for her in small, deliberate ways. He listens differently. He pays attention without trying. He begins to protect bond quietly, not through possession, but through presence. This is the kind of love that does not rush, that does not seek validation. It grows quietly, rooted in the comfort that makes him feel human again. When he finds that peace, he holds on to it, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Comfort becomes his attachment because it reminds him of something ancient, the memory of what it feels like to be understood without having to explain. He realizes that real connection does not exhaust him, it restores him. It does not demand effort, it invites ease. And in that ease, he discovers the truest form of love, not one that burns with desire, but one that glows with peace. This is why a man may drift from those who excite him, but stay close to those who calm him. Passion may draw his eyes, but comfort holds his heart. When he feels seen, not for what he gives, but for who he is, something within him begins to attach silently. He may not even call it love yet, but his soul already knows. Because comfort is not something the mind analyzes. It is something the heart recognizes immediately. It is the quiet knowing that says, I can be myself here. At the deeper he feels that sense of home, the more he returns to it. Not because he needs to escape the world, but because he wants to remember who he is beneath all its noise. Comfort becomes his anchor in a restless life. It becomes the invisible bond that holds him even when words fail, even when distance appears, even when everything else changes. Because once a man has tasted peace in someone's presence, everything else feels loud, temporary, and incomplete. A man may be drawn by beauty, intrigued by charm, and moved by kindness, but what truly awakens his deeper admiration, what stirs the quiet reverence within him, is respect. Respect is not flattery, nor is it submission. It is the recognition of value, the quiet acknowledgement of worth without comparison, without demand, without control. When a man feels genuinely respected, something profound begins to shift inside him. His heart, which is often guarded by layers of pride and self-defense, starts to soften. His admiration awakens not because of how much attention he receives, but because he feels seen in the way that truly matters. As a human being striving to stand tall in a world that constantly questions his strength, every man carries an invisible burden. It is the silent weight of expectations, to lead, to provide, to be steady, to suppress his emotions. Much of his life is spent proving that he is capable, that he is strong enough, that he is enough. But beneath that armor lies a sensitive core that longs to be recognized, not for his accomplishments, but for his intentions. Respect touches that core. It tells him, without words, I see your effort, I understand your struggle, I value your presence. And in that moment of recognition, admiration begins to grow, not as ego, but as gratitude. Respect is the language that speaks directly to a man's soul. It is not loud. It does not seek to control. It simply allows space for him to stand in his truth. When he feels respected, he feels safe enough to reveal more of himself. He begins to express his vulnerability, his fears, his dreams, because he no longer feels judged. Respect does not question his worth, it affirms it. It says, you do not have to be perfect for me to see your sincerity. And in that acceptance, he feels a quiet sense of devotion begin to unfold. The admiration that arises from respect is different from attraction. Attraction excites him, respect humbles him. Attraction can fade when novelty disappears, but respect endures because it's built on understanding. When a woman respects a man, she does not seek to change him. She sees who he is and allows him to grow at his own pace. She does not compete with his strength, she mirrors it. She does not diminish his silence, she listens to it. She does not interrupt his stillness, she trusts it. And because of that, he begins to see her differently. Not as someone who demands his energy, but as someone who balances it. Respect builds admiration because it creates harmony between two energies that often clash, the need to lead and the desire to be understood. When a man feels respected, he feels honored, not controlled. His ego does not need to defend itself. He stops seeking validation from the outside world because he has already found recognition in her eyes. That recognition fuels him. It inspires him to be better, to act with more integrity, to protect what he values. Respect to him becomes nourishment. It gives meaning to his strength. He admires not only the one who respects him, but also the way she carries herself. Because true respect cannot be given by someone who does not first possess self-respect. When she stands in her own power, when she has boundaries without coldness, when she speaks truth without aggression, he feels drawn to her in a way he cannot fully explain. Her strength does not threaten him, it awakens him. He sees in her a reflection of balance, the union of gentleness and power, and that is what commands his lasting admiration. Respect also brings order to love. Without respect, love becomes unstable. It turns into control, fear, or dependency. But when respect is present, love becomes calm. It allows two people to walk side by side, not one above the other. It creates space for honesty, for accountability, for growth. A man who feels respected does not feel the need to dominate, he feels the desire to protect. His love becomes not a display of ownership, but an expression of reverence. Respect is not about agreeing with everything he says or doing everything he wants. It is about acknowledging his perspective, even when it differs from yours. It is about recognizing his effort, even when the outcome isn't perfect. It is about allowing him to fail without humiliation, to learn without shame. When she shows him that grace, his admiration deepens. Because in a world that often mocks male vulnerability, finding someone who honors it feels like finding sanctuary. He begins to admire her not just for her words, but for her composure. How she reacts when things go wrong, how she speaks when he is silent, how she carries herself in moments of tension. These are the things that stay in his memory. Respect is not always in what is said, it is in what is withheld. It is in her ability to pause, to listen, to trust the rhythm of connection rather than force it. That kind of grace leaves a lasting mark on his spirit. When a man feels respected, he becomes more gentle. His defenses lower, his patience grows, his loyalty strengthens. Because respect gives him back his sense of dignity. It tells him that he can be himself without being diminished. And when he feels that, admiration flows naturally. He begins to value not only the person who respects him, but also the feeling she evokes. The feeling of being free yet grounded, strong yet seen. Many people misunderstand what admiration truly is. It is not worship, it is not submission. It is recognition of the sacred balance between two souls who meet each other with understanding. When respect is given sincerely, it transforms the way a man loves. It turns attraction into appreciation and appreciation into commitment. He no longer seeks excitement elsewhere because what he admires has already awakened something enduring inside him. Respect awakens his admiration because it allows him to experience love without fear. It makes him feel valued, not used. It makes him feel capable, not pressured. It reminds him that love is not a battlefield, but a place of restoration. And when he finds that kind of respect, he does not take it lightly. It becomes the compass that guides his loyalty, the foundation that shapes his trust, and the quiet force that makes him return again and again to the one who saw his worth before the world did. A man may be intrigued by passion, inspired by beauty, or fascinated by words. But what truly allows him to open his heart is consistency. It is the quiet rhythm that tells him he is safe to unfold. It is the repetition of truth, the reliability of presence, the steady energy that does not shift with mood or circumstance. A man learns trust not through intensity, but through stability. Consistency is what teaches him that feelings can be real, that intentions can endure, and that love can remain grounded even when emotions fluctuate. For many men, trust is not easily given. It is something earned slowly, over time, through patterns that match words. He observes quietly. He watches how you move when no one is watching, how you react when things don't go your way, how you treat him when he is not at his best. He notices if your tone changes with convenience or if your care depends on how much he gives. When he sees that your presence remains steady through both peace and tension, something inside him begins to soften. He begins to believe. Consistency is not about perfection, it is about reliability. It tells him, you can relax here, you can be human. Men live in a world that demands performance. They are taught to provide, to protect, to endure. Yet beneath that armor lies a quiet longing, a desire to rest in the presence of someone who does not constantly question their worth. When a woman is consistent, she offers that kind of rest. Her words and actions align. Her emotions don't swing with every wind. Her presence doesn't fluctuate between closeness and distance. She is simply there, calm, dependable, unwavering. And that steadiness becomes a form of trust he can lean on. Consistency speaks louder than affection. Anyone can express love when everything feels right, but consistency shows up even when things are uncertain. It does not withdraw at the first sign of difficulty. It does not use silence as punishment or emotion as manipulation. It stays, it listens, it remains respectful even in disagreement. To a man, that steadiness becomes sacred. It tells him that he is not just loved when he performs, but valued when he is imperfect. That realization builds a kind of trust that no promise can replace. The reason consistency creates such deep trust is because it mirrors the laws of nature. The sun rises each day, the tides return, the seasons change in rhythm. This is how life teaches stability. A man's heart, though strong, yearns for that same rhythm in connection. He does not need perfection. He needs predictability. Not predictability in excitement, but in energy. In knowing that when he reaches out, the same calm presence will be there. It's this emotional reliability that allows him to lower his defenses. Without it, he stays guarded, even in love. When she is consistent, she teaches him emotional safety. He begins to speak more openly, not because he is pushed to, but because he feels no threat. He no longer needs to analyze her intentions. He no longer questions if affection today will turn into rejection tomorrow. That sense of steadiness brings out the best in him. His gentleness grows. His patience expands. He becomes more expressive, more attentive, because trust transforms him. It turns love from a risk into a refuge. Consistency also reveals depth. It shows that care is not temporary, that affection is not an act of convenience. When a woman shows up again and again, not through dramatic gestures, but through small, sincere actions, it leaves a lasting mark. A text that comes without reason, a word of kindness when tension rises, a tone that remains calm when emotions surge. These moments accumulate. They become proof that love can endure movement without losing its center. He starts to feel that her heart has rhythm, and that rhythm aligns with his. Trust for a man is built quietly. It is not formed in declarations but in patterns. He trusts what he can rely on, not what he can imagine. That is why consistency matters more to him than excitement. Excitement fades, but reliability stays. When he sees that she does what she says, that her emotions do not betray her promises, he begins to give something rare, his vulnerability. He allows her to see the parts of him the world does not. He lets her witness his uncertainty, his exhaustion, his inner stillness, because he knows that consistency will not judge him for it. When inconsistency appears, his heart retreats. He remembers the instability of past experiences, the sudden withdrawal of affection, the unpredictability that once left him confused. But when consistency appears, he feels clarity. It's not the grand words that make him stay, it's the quiet reliability. He does not need to question her intentions because her actions already answer them. In that predictability, love becomes simple. And simplicity, for a man who has lived through complexity, feels sacred. Consistency becomes his trust because it shows loyalty without having to announce it. When she supports him in silence, when she listens without judging, when she remains patient while he grows, he notices. Every act of reliability becomes a thread, and over time, those threads weave the fabric of trust. It's not one big moment that earns his faith, but the thousand small ones that prove she won't disappear when life becomes difficult. There is a peace that comes with being around someone consistent. It's the peace of not having to question what will happen next. He doesn't have to wonder if her mood will shift with the day, or if affection will vanish after disagreement. That predictability doesn't make the connection dull, it makes it deep. Because where there is consistency, love can grow without fear. It can root itself without resistance. It can rise without collapsing. When a man finds that kind of steadiness, his entire way of loving changes. He stops testing. He stops doubting. He begins to trust with his full being. Consistency gives him the foundation to build on. It tells him that love can be something he doesn't have to fight for every day, that it can simply exist. Strong, stable, quiet. That trust becomes the pillar of his devotion, the anchor that holds him steady in the unpredictable currents of emotion. And it is in that unshakable rhythm that his loyalty is born. Because to a man, the most beautiful feeling is not constant excitement, but constant peace. Consistency becomes the silent proof of sincerity, the calm undercurrent of all affection, the reason his heart decides, I can trust this, I can stay here, I can rest here. A man does not fall in love only with presence. He falls in love with absence too. He loves the spaces between connection, the pauses where he is allowed to breathe, the freedom to move without being pulled. It is not the constant closeness that deepens his feelings, but the trust that allows space to exist between two people. When he is given room to think, to be alone, to return on his own terms, he feels something rare, respect for his individuality, and that respect becomes love. A man does not stay where he feels trapped. He stays where he feels trusted, where the silence between moments is not mistaken for distance but understood as part of the rhythm of love. He loves the space you don't feel because it tells him he is free. Not free from the relationship, but free within it. It means he is not suffocated by constant demands for attention or validation. It means he can carry his inner world without fear that it will be taken personally. That space allows him to miss you in a way that is natural, not forced. When you step back, you allow his affection to step forward. When you give him stillness, he begins to notice how much your presence matters. Distance, when given with understanding, becomes devotion's teacher. Men fall in love with the feeling of peace. They admire beauty. They crave connection, but they stay where they can breathe. When a woman allows space, emotional, mental, spiritual, she speaks to the part of him that longs for balance. That quiet gap becomes a mirror where he meets himself again. He can think, reflect, and return with clarity. And in that returning, his love grows stronger, not because of what is done for him, but because of what is not demanded from him. Space is not absence, it is trust made visible. When she does not fill every silence, he feels respected. When she does not chase every answer, he feels seen. When she does not question every delay, he feels safe. A man who is trusted to move through his own silence learns to value the person who gives him that room. He does not forget it, because so much of his life is spent defending that space from work, from expectations, from the pressure to always perform. But when he finds someone who honors his need to pause, he begins to attach his peace to her presence. She becomes the balance between stillness and connection. He loves the space you don't fill because it gives him the rare gift of autonomy. A man who feels controlled begins to close. A man who feels trusted begins to open. He doesn't fall for those who chase him endlessly, but for the one who understands that love does not need to be monitored to be real. When he senses that you are not trying to manage his emotions or prove your worth through constant effort, he begins to relax into the bond. That relaxation is where attachment takes root. It's not in the constant talking, but in the comfort of silence. Not in the closeness that suffocates, but in the space that breathes. There is a quiet wisdom in giving space. It shows emotional maturity. It shows confidence. It tells him that your love does not come from fear, that your care is not rooted in insecurity. It communicates that you value connection, but you also value balance. And because of that, he begins to admire you not only for your affection, but for your restraint. He learns that your love is not about possession, it is about respect. That realization awakens his deeper commitment, not because you chase him, but because you allow him to come toward you freely. In that freedom, he finds meaning. Because when he returns after silence, it is not out of guilt, but out of choice. He comes back not because he has to, but because he wants to. That choice makes his love real. When space exists between two people, it becomes a place where reflection happens. He remembers how your voice feels in his mind, how your presence changes the air around him. Absence becomes awareness. Distance becomes appreciation. Love then becomes conscious, not reactive. He loves the space you don't fill because it allows the connection to mature. When you give him room, you give the relationship depth. Closeness is beautiful, but it needs air to breathe. Just as fire dies without oxygen, love fades when there is no space for individuality. In that space, he grows, he thinks, he learns. And every time he returns, he brings more of himself, more understanding, more peace, more presence. The space you allow becomes the unseen bridge between your hearts. Men often express love differently. Some show it through action, some through silence, some through consistency. But all men need the space to process what they feel. When emotions come too fast, they step back, not because they do not care, but because they need clarity. When you allow that without resistance, you become his calm, not his conflict. You become the place where his soul feels understood without explanation. And that is why space, given wisely, becomes intimacy in disguise. He may not say it, but he notices how you handle his silence. If you meet it with peace instead of panic, he feels safe. If you trust that his distance is temporary, he feels valued. If you stay rooted when he withdraws, he learns that your connection is not fragile. That silent strength becomes the foundation of his trust. He sees that your love does not need to be proven every moment. It simply exists, steady and quiet, waiting without fear. Space also protects love from turning into dependency. It keeps mystery alive. It keeps curiosity breathing. When he has space to miss you, he rediscovers you. When he has silence to reflect, he begins to feel gratitude. This is not detachment, this is sacred distance, the invisible rhythm that keeps love alive. Without it, affection becomes exhaustion. But with it, connection remains magnetic, balanced, alive. He loves the space you don't fill because it honors both of you. It gives him freedom to explore his own mind and you the peace to remain whole without him. It creates a relationship where both souls can expand instead of shrink. Love, when it is mature, does not cling, it allows. And in that allowing, something unexplainable happens. He begins to miss you, not out of lack, but out of love. He begins to return, not out of need, but out of devotion. Because the space you don't fill becomes the very place where his heart learns how to stay. There are feelings that move quietly within a man. Emotions too deep for words, too sacred for explanation. He may not understand them fully, yet they live inside him, shaping the way he looks, speaks, and acts around you. What he feels, he cannot name. Because what he feels does not belong to the mind, it belongs to the soul. It is not excitement or desire or even affection as he has known before. It is something more subtle, more enduring, something that arrives without warning and refuses to leave. It is not loud, but it is constant. It does not seek attention, yet it changes everything. When a man begins to feel something he cannot name, it does not rush through him like a storm. It enters slowly, like light slipping into a dark room. It moves softly through his awareness, unsettling his routine, humbling his certainty. He starts to notice small things, your silence, your laughter, the way you occupy a room. He begins to feel peace when you're near and restlessness when you're far, though he may not admit either. It's not a feeling he can control or define, and that's why it unsettles him. The mind seeks logic, but the heart speaks in language without sound. He may try to analyze it at first, to place it into something familiar, attraction, admiration, curiosity. But this feeling doesn't fit into those simple categories. It lingers, it expands, it doesn't fade with distance. It doesn't dissolve when the mind tells him it should. It is something that grows even in silence. And that is what confuses him most. Because the world has taught him to name everything, to define, to label, to understand. Yet this feeling escapes the boundaries of vocabulary. It's not something he can explain, only something he can feel. What he feels is recognition. It's as if he has met you before, not in this lifetime, but somewhere familiar, beyond time and logic. When your energy touches his, something ancient stirs, a quiet knowing that doesn't require proof. He doesn't fall in love with what you do or how you look, but with how he feels when you're around. You awaken a part of him that was sleeping. You reflect back to him something he lost sight of. Softness, calm, truth. He cannot name it because it feels both new and eternal at the same time. This unnamed feeling is what humbles him. It makes him quiet. It slows his thoughts. It reminds him that love is not always a choice. Sometimes it's recognition disguised as emotion. When he feels this way, words become useless. He doesn't know what to say because nothing he says would match what he feels. It is not infatuation. It is not desire. It is stillness. It is depth. It is the kind of emotion that doesn't seek to be declared, only to be lived. He may appear distant when he feels this, not because he doesn't care, but because he is overwhelmed. A man who feels deeply often retreats not to escape, but to understand. His mind tries to make sense of what his heart already knows. He may not know why he thinks of you when the world goes quiet, why your presence lingers long after you've left. He may not know why he feels peace in your silence, or why he finds himself becoming better without even trying. What he feels is transformation, not attraction. It's something shifting within him, and he doesn't yet have language for it. When a man cannot name what he feels, it means the feeling has moved beyond the surface. It has entered the place where logic ends and truth begins. He may not call it love, not yet, because love, to him, has always been something defined, a word with limits. But what he feels now has no limits. It doesn't rise and fall with moods. It simply exists quietly, like a pulse. It's there when he works. It's there when he works. It's there when he's alone. It's not something he does, it's something that happens through him. This feeling changes the way he sees the world. Colors feel softer. Time feels slower. Noise becomes less interesting. He begins to value peace over thrill, meaning over motion. You have become not just a person to him, but a presence, a mirror of something sacred within himself. He cannot name it because it is not an emotion he was taught to feel. It is not about wanting, it is about understanding. It is not about possession, it is about connection. What he feels, he cannot name, because naming would limit it. The moment he tries to define it, he risks reducing it to something ordinary, and this feeling is anything but ordinary. It's the type of emotion that makes him question who he is, that invites him to grow, that breaks open his idea of love and rebuilds it in silence. It doesn't demand, it doesn't rush, it simply is. And though he doesn't speak of it, he carries it in the way he looks at you, the way he pauses before answering, the way his energy softens when you appear. He feels something he cannot explain because it is not meant to be explained. It is meant to be experienced. It is meant to unfold slowly, like dawn spreading across the sky. What he feels is the quiet realization that he is seen, not as a role, not as a protector, not as an image, but as a being. And when someone sees him like that, his heart responds before his mind can intervene. The feeling is both comfort and fear. Comfort because it feels right, fear because it feels beyond control. He cannot name it because love, in its truest form, is not a concept, it's a recognition of essence. It is the point where two energies meet and remember each other. It's the silence after conversation, the stillness after laughter, the peace after chaos. When he feels this, words become small. What he feels is not meant to be spoken, it's meant to be honored. And so he remains quiet, allowing the feeling to live, to move, to grow within him without needing to define it. Because some emotions are too vast for language, too sacred for description, too real for names,